Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Equal Africa powered by the IGLTA Foundation Pride webinar. I'm LoAnn Halden, VP of Communications for the International LGBTQ Travel Association, which is the global leader in advancing LGBTQ travel. And I'm here today with an incredible group of panelists who are talking about the experiences and challenges of developing Pride across the African continent and what it can actually mean in the tourism perspective. We're here in June because it's Pride Month, traditionally celebrated around the world because of the Stonewall Rebellion in New York, which took place in 1969. And this act of activism and heroism and rebellion from the LGBTQ community standing up against discrimination is considered the catalyst for the modern LGBTQ rights movement. And over time, out of this celebration of the Pride Rebellion has come parades, events, community-driven projects around the world that not only serve as acts of politicism and protest, but also serve as ways to celebrate and uplift our diverse LGBTQ community. Pride has also become a significant driver of tourism around the world. And I wanted to just share with you a few statistics from IGLTA from a global perspective on Pride. In 2018, we produced the Handbook on LGBTQ travel with the European Travel Commission, and they specifically looked at Pride as drivers of tourism. And our respondents ranked it as a significant indicator of LGBTQ acceptance when they were evaluating where to travel. And on average, Pride was their top activity choice for their next trip to Europe. We followed up our inclusion of Pride with our 2021 LGBTQ travel survey, which was looking at travel immediately after the pandemic had hit. And we were looking at how LGBTQ people were returning to travel. And although group travel was still something that was low ranked, Pride events were actually a major driver of tourism interest for our community, indicating that strong need for members of our traveling family to reconnect after being so isolated during pandemic lockdowns. And most recently, Globetrender in the UK released an interesting report on the future of queer travel. And among its top trends was Pride travel. And a statistic that I particularly wanted to share related to that is that through a study with Airbnb, they looked at income in the month of June, specifically around major Pride events. Airbnb hosts collectively earned over US $77 million during 2022 Pride celebrations by welcoming queer guests, which offers a window into the economic potential of Pride events for the travel industry. So here to discuss this, how this impact can translate to Africa, I have an incredible group of panelists. Nonhlanhla Mkhize, AKA MC, which makes it much easier for this American moderator to pronounce, is the co-founder and executive director of the Lesbian and Gay Community and Health Center, which is a project of the KwaZulu-Natal Coalition for Gay and Lesbian Equality. They conduct diversity training as well as human rights education and advocacy. And as a member of the KwaZulu-Natal Gay and Lesbian Tourism Association, she's involved in organizing the annual Durban Pride Liberation March and Festival. So thank you for being with us today, MC. Rodney Otieno is in Kenya, and he's the co-founder and director of policy development and membership for the Queer and Allied Chamber of Commerce Africa, based in Nairobi, QACC Africa, an organization that creates inclusive ecosystems for queer entrepreneurs and facilitates commercial relationships and empowerment, widening LGBTQ supply chains throughout Africa. They also provide inclusivity and diversity training. And Rodney has been actively involved in queer events in a community where visibility is not so easy. And the ripple effects from Uganda recently are being felt across his country. Aisha Shaibu-Lenoir, who is now a hyphenate, congratulations on your marriage, is a prominent queer activist, cultural producer, and the founder of Moonlight Experiences, which is dedicated to the celebration of queer culture through travel and experiences. And it exists to tackle the lack of diversity in the travel industry by harnessing the economic power of tourism and nightlife to uplift queer women, non-binary, and Black and people of color in our community. She is the 2023 LGBTQ ambassador for Kontiki, which runs group tours in the 18 to 35-year category around the world. And many of those tours go through Africa, while she'll be focusing on making them more accessible and inclusive. She's also head of community engagement at UK Black Pride, which is the largest Black Pride event in the world. And last, but certainly not least, is a panelist familiar to many South African viewers, Michael Gladwin, who is the founder of LGBTQ+ travel company Afrigay Travel, offering curated experiences around the globe. He's created some amazing LGBTQ events in Africa specifically. He has more than 20 years of experience in tourism and hospitality. And now he has developed a much needed product which will help change the landscape of LGBTQ+ tourism in the continent, AllStay, a training program that assists tourism organizations in reaching an accredited level of LGBTQ+ friendliness and authenticity. And through his work with Cape Town Tourism, he's now taking a more active role in their Pride and is leading the charge to bring World Pride to Cape Town. So thank you so much, all of you, for the amazing work that you're doing in this space. And I want to jump right in with MC to talk about Durban Pride and the impact that it has within your local community. MC.
Good morning. I think at this moment in time, you requested me to switch on my camera. So I do apologize. We're starting this morning. It's Pride Week for us in Durban, but it's also a week within which the country is also hosting its South African AIDS conference. So we've twinned the two struggles, very much true to the form of who we are as Durban Pride. It's a community organized event, and we strive towards making sure that while Pride for us is a protest, but that Pride is also very much a space within which we celebrate our diversity as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex communities, but also taking into account the mere fact that we are children born of families, and even if it means those families may not always support us, that it is important that we make that message resonate. So when it comes to Durban Pride and its impact as a result, insofar as the province is concerned, we would want to believe that at least on both, when it comes to socio-economic empowerment, but also when it comes to the concept of, I'm going to switch off my camera a little bit, if that's okay, colleagues. But when it comes to, one, the socio-economic empowerment space, ours is very much about selling the concept of Pride as not just a one-day campaign activity, but a year-long campaign. And then the idea with it is making sure that our investment, not just as the city, not just as a province, but not just also as government or civil society, but also as business, that the investment that is made towards the observation and therefore the commemoration of the installment of Pride is such that it is welcomed and embraced, but also that around it, the understanding is that we are supposed to be communities that are making a change. And how does this change then visibilize itself? Working with the KZN, Gay and Lesbian Tourism Association, we make sure that we provide training to members of the coalition, or at least of the association, so that their staff from frontline all the way to senior management are sensitized about the package of service that they provide to their clientele. But also to make sure that in catering for diversity, the understanding is not only insofar as working with heterosexual couples, but also being mindful of diversity within just relationships, but also being mindful of diversity insofar as age, race, and finding articulation within those spaces that is such that it attracts people to both the province and the city. I think for us, the opportune moment that we realize the importance of this twinning as a campaign, but also working with the Tourism Association, was when in 2006, South Africa became one of the first countries in the continent to have recognized civil unions. And of course, it meant we had quite a number of couples across the world that came to the country wanting to celebrate, but also wanting to have their civil unions be solemnized, which meant what has happened in our courts or has happened in parliament insofar as policy is concerned had to be translated to what people would experience when they come to the country. Are our systems ready for diversity and to welcome those different couples and their families as they come from across? Is our hospitality industry ready to embrace the type of diversity? The service providers on the ground, from our lawyers to our accountants, everybody else, are they sensitized and are they on the same page? So I think for us, if one can put it in a nutshell, so far it's just the impact from a socioeconomic empowerment space, where we've used the concept of Durban Pride, but also taking advantage of the strides that the country has made and may had them visibilized in how our partnership has happened, is prioritizing those, the mere fact that you be a member of the Tourism Association. Some of the benefits are you get trained, you get sensitized, but also you are part and parcel of a monitoring process, which you can use insofar as advertising your business, insofar as saying it is an inclusive space, an inclusive service provider, but at the same time, making sure that it's also allowing for staff within that space to shine, grow, and thrive as either LGBTI people themselves or attract young and up-and-coming LGBTI to be in that business. And like I said, the last aspect is the one that is social responsibility orientated, where it is about making sure that when events like this happen, we have our business partners come on board to support and therefore make themselves visible. I hope that sort of gives you a sense of what we would like to believe has been our milestone, especially since 2006 to date.
I think that was an incredible overview, MC, and a great springboard for many of the topics that we want to touch upon. One of the things that you said, though, is how Durban Pride really rose in prominence and built upon the positive laws in South Africa. But Rodney, for you, what does Pride look like when you're in a country that does not have that kind of support, and now you're feeling the backlash from what we all know has been the main headline grabber for Africa recently, the anti-gay crackdown in Uganda?
I think being here in Nairobi, we've always done Pride every single year, irrespective of what the legal framework always says. I guess Nairobi people are we are more out there, we speak our minds, and irrespective of what the law has always said, we've always added spaces to have gatherings and events. And I think the first time we ever did a big Pride, I say Pride party because we can't go on the street and march because, again, of the legal framework here. We did one with a restaurant when we opened the space, and the anticipation was to have 100 people gather. What we ended up was with 800 people who wanted to come and just have a good time in a safe space. And we had buses coming in from different spaces until 6 in the morning from 4 p.m. So it was a good experience. And we've seen that change over the years as what is happening in Uganda, everything, all the anti-LGBTQ policies being introduced in different places in Africa. Most people have become scared, but that has not changed how we still want to celebrate Pride. So what's happening in Nairobi, what's happening in Nairobi is that every single weekend there's an event happening, or there's a concept happening. One weekend we have storytelling, another weekend we have mental awareness training, just different. Then another weekend we have queer people just coming in safe spaces and watching a queer Netflix movie and just being part of and parcel of the community in safe spaces. As opposed to the different years, this time security and safety is of the utmost importance, especially for the organizers during the events. Very sorry, I'm having a cold here. And what has happened is that initially we were able to post them online on social media so that many people can come and join. But this time it's more of a word of referral. I have to know you to be able to pass that information on to you, because at this stage you don't know who you're passing that information to. So there's less visibility in terms of those events, and just make sure that we create safe spaces, and we have to talk to business owners who are our allies to provide those safe spaces, because there are not so many safe spaces that we are able to be together and just be with one another during this Pride Month. But it's still happening. And what we've seen, especially this month, most Ugandans have come from Uganda to Kenya, either as refugees or find a way of coming to celebrate Pride Month as in Kenya. And it's been an easy incorporation, just welcome in, like we know what's happening in Uganda. How can we be able to assist? What can we be able to do? And how can we be able to provide a safe space irrespective of what the legal framework says? Because Pride for us is more of solidarity. As Kenyan, again, goes back to the penal code. It's not illegal to be gay or to be queer. It's the act that is illegal. So we work within that legal framework to be able to have our events and just be able to incorporate and be able to solidarity and just sympathize with our neighbors in Uganda, and for them to be able to enjoy Pride as they used to.
I think it's such an important aspect of this conversation to illustrate that Pride is happening everywhere. I think for so many of us globally looking in at Africa, there's this idea that maybe Pride only exists in Johannesburg and Cape Town, but in fact, there are queer events happening throughout the continent very successfully. Aisha, you actually tap into some of those events through your work with Moonlight Experiences, and also you have family ties as well to Ghana and Nigeria. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about how LGBTQ events uplift marginalized voices and the bigger picture of Pride, because you work with Black Pride, in how we can expand the understanding for the tourism industry of what Pride actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for having me here. It's just so wonderful to be able to sit among this incredible panelists and to kind of discuss about something that I think for so long should have happened, but also the fact that this is not the first time we're talking about this. The work has always existed, and a lot of people do try to kind of amplify marginalized voices, but just like many kind of prides around the world, only the commercial prides get that support, only the commercial pride get that visibility, and often grassroots projects and smaller prides don't get that. We've seen that throughout UK Black Pride. UK Black Pride has existed for 18 years, and it's only the last couple of years that we've actually got more support, or the support or recognition that we needed. But the Pride was started because a lot of people didn't see themselves in the commercial Pride. Even though I'm based in London, Pride doesn't feel like it's for everybody. It always tends to be for a small section of people, in the UK, predominantly catered to gay white men. And if you don't fit a particular box, you don't feel as welcome. So having UK Black Pride created a home. And this is what it is like for so many people across the world, is creating a home and being in a safe space where they know that they can be themselves. And up to today, you know, I feel the difference when I go to UK Black Pride versus any other Black Pride or any other Pride across the UK. I mean, so much that now we have Trans Pride as well. So because so many people feel like they are not being seen, and starting these smaller Pride actually make them feel a little bit more like they belong. But also through Moonlight Experiences, you know, based on what everybody has been saying, all across the African continent, there are constantly events. In Nigeria, in Ghana, there are more and more people also, friends of mine leaving London and moving back to Ghana, queer couples who are putting on events as well and wanting to kind of support in that way. So I think the landscape in which I think how we view Africa and the prides or the events is very limited, because it's always about representation and visibility. When we don't see that through the media, when we don't see that through communication, we assume the worst, you know, and we kind of tend to hold on to the biggest news, which is this is what's going on in Uganda, which is true, but then it means that it alienates any of the good work, and it alienates anything that has been happening over the last years, you know, the progress that's been made. I don't know the last time I've turned on certain news or seen media outlets that are like, hey, this is great things that are going on in South Africa, for example. It always happens through word of mouth, you know, similar to what Rodney does. If you don't know, it feels like it never exists. And these prides, I think, over the next couple of years will play a vital tool in how people really can view not just African country, but the tourism that actually exists within there.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that's probably part of the reason why Michael has gotten involved in the massive undertaking of trying to bring World Pride to Cape Town. So, Michael, I'm really interested in what inspired you to get involved in this project. Why now? Why World Pride Africa?
So thanks, LoAnn. I think first of all, it's important to state that we're very lucky in South Africa, because yes, June is International Pride Month thanks to the Stonewall Uprising, but October is South African Pride, because on the 12th of October 1990 is when our very first Pride happened in South Africa. So we do celebrate it in October as well. The work that we do in the tourism space from an LGBT perspective, and currently with Cape Town Tourism, the inspiration came to reposition and create the great visibility again around Cape Town as the LGBT capital of Africa, as the beacon of hope, as the opportunity for us to create a voice for the LGBT community across Africa, because we have the infrastructure, we have incredible support, we have the constitution behind us. We are faced with a number of challenges, of course, currently, even in Cape Town, even though we are mostly very progressive. I always find that on paper, constitutionally and human behavior are not necessarily integrated with one another, and it's important that we do. So why World Pride Cape Town for 2028? The conversation needs to be had. It should have started many years ago. And World Pride is a very big, yes, it's a Pride celebration, but there's a very strong human rights element to the World Pride event. And in light of especially in light of what's happening in Uganda currently and other parts of Africa, we can create a conversation. We can start the stories. We can start getting governments on board. We can start getting the right people on board, international support to start making these changes. Of course, from a tourism perspective, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It makes absolute sense. Pride, the World Pride event will attract a large number of people onto the African continent. Yes, of course, into Cape Town, but people travel beyond that. So it's really important to focus on both elements here, the human rights element, as well as the growth of LGBT tourism within South Africa and, of course, within the African context as well.
Well, and they always go hand in hand, right? There can't be movement forward and change without awareness, and tourism does drive awareness and interaction. I mean, that's why we as IGLTA are anti-boycott as an organization, because we don't want to stop having conversations on the ground and disconnect our queer communities in countries that have challenges from being a part of the conversations and making these connections.
Absolutely. And I think, and if I may, LoAnn, as well, even in countries in Africa that have less challenges, like South Africa and Cape Town specifically, it's really important to think beyond the concept of we welcome everyone. We need to understand why we need to be inclusive and how we need to be inclusive, what we need to do in order to become truly inclusive. We can't just say we are, we need to action it.
Well, how do you connect the dots for the tourism industry? And this is really a question for all of you. So I'll let you launch into the bigger conversation now. But what does that mean for the tourism industry to actually support Pride? Aisha, you can start us off, and we'll just throw it around the room.
Sorry. Yeah, I can kickstart it. I think in our earlier conversation, we're talking about what the tourism industry can do. I mean, kicking off, there's multiple things, and I think all of us here will kind of touch upon a little bit. For me, it's about being here in London with my family in Ghana and Nigeria. I've lived in Nigeria as well when I was younger. So for me, I want to see better representation of African countries, but also I want it to be positive and not for something happening in one area to tarnish the whole continent. I mean, there's loads of things happening in Europe, the UK right now, the US, when you look at various other places across the world, they're not doing very well either. You know, things are happening in Poland, but I don't hear anybody going, oh, well, I'm not coming to Europe. You know, things are going on in Poland. There's a lot of anti-trans laws or policies coming into place in the UK. I wouldn't dare go to London. We don't have the same, I guess, view, or we don't see in the same lens. But the moment certain things happen in African countries, it's like it gets tarnished. And I think this is because there's a lack of better understanding. So I think later on, this is where it comes with education. So from visibility, education, the list starts growing in terms of specifically what the tourism industry can do. The tourism industry has the power to attract so many people across the world. And I think that's really important to start focusing on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, you were recently in Malta helping them jumpstart their education awareness activities around Europride coming later this year. What were your takeaways from that in terms of how the tourism industry needs to gain understanding and better awareness of what Pride means?
So I think that the major challenge here is that the very big picture concept of rainbow washing or pink washing is still a major problem. Kudos to Malta Tourism for the work that they've started, and I feel very privileged to be a part of the process. We had to change perceptions around why they're doing it. The initial thinking was they have the Europride event coming to their country in September this year, so they need to get ready for that. So we had to change the perception around Europride as the catalyst for what you need to do in the future. It's more than just focusing on a Pride event. Yes, the Pride events are important because there is value, and there are LGBT travelers who travel for Pride events, and there is value in that. But we need to look beyond that. We need to create an environment where through education, as Aisha said, we are tapping into these tourism and hospitality organizations, and we're helping them understand the need to dig a lot deeper than just putting a rainbow flag on their marketing collateral for a specific Pride event. We need to think beyond the LGBT traveler as well, and we need to start talking to the non-LGBT person who works in those organizations and help them be okay with it. It's a case of almost understanding a cultural, an LGBT cultural competency within an organization, so that in order to position yourself as truly authentic and truly inclusive, it goes a lot deeper than just doing something for the sake of checking the box for Pride. So the work we're doing with Malta Tourism, for example, is continuing. It is going beyond Europride. It's not just about Pride. Likewise, with the work we're doing with Cape Town Tourism and the City of Cape Town for our World Pride bid, it's not just about the World Pride. We're working with organizations and hospitality and tourism organizations in Cape Town to help them get it right, or with benefit to them, to do it better than they already are, so that it's become sustainable. So in the big picture, we can eventually stop this conversation and we're all just inclusive.
No, absolutely. I think that in some ways there's this issue that people don't know where to start because they're afraid they're going to offend, they're going to get something wrong. Rodney, you brought this up in a conversation that we had recently. How do you talk to the tourism industry when they say, oh, we don't know where to start and we're concerned we're going to do something wrong, so maybe we shouldn't even be here?
I think just from my own regional perspective is that sometimes it's hard to defend or even represent our case to the local authorities, especially the tourism sector, because there's no way we are able to capture that data. Because if it's not visible, how do we capture the data? How do we say this is the amount that the Pride contributes? Pride is happening everywhere in Nairobi all over the month, and there's a huge economical contribution, but there's no one capturing that data. If we are able to be in a position to capture that data and represent it to whoever is in charge of a specific body, we are not saying legalize it. We're not saying, we just say this is the much we contribute. How do you as a government tap into that without legalizing or stepping on anyone's toes? So I think also that's one thing, that data, and it's very important that I love how you represented the Airbnb contribution, how much was captured during Pride Month throughout the years. And of course it's happening, but we don't know because we are not in a position to be able to have those figures. So it's good to, when we compare from the international perspective, especially right now, if we have the data happening right now in London, this is Pride Month, this is the amount that was contributed. If we can represent the same, and throughout the years, we'll see some changes because there's some economical contribution that Pride contributes to the country. And also sometimes, again, it goes back to your second question, LoAnn. Sometimes the government or just private organizations wants to come in and assist us in Pride or want to find a way to be able to be involved. But again, it goes back to the LGBTQ is a very complex community. And sometimes people get scared of, what if I say something wrong? What if I mess up the acronym? Or what if I say something that offends you? So I think that fear, again, goes back to education. We need to have open conversations, open sessions with people who are open to be our allies, but they don't know, understand how to come into our world. So it goes back to education. Again, just desensitization, because as queer people, we have a wall constantly because of the prejudice that we face every day, either at the workplace or just in the society. So we have a wall built up every single time. But people want to come in and people want to be our allies, people want to assist us. So it's good to have that honest education process of saying this and this, so that when person wants to come in, they know the right terminology, or they have the knowledge to be able to talk to us on a safe space.
So you're running a series of webinars, correct, through the chamber to help with these conversations?
Exactly. So we were in school in April, representing the chamber, just meeting with different social entrepreneurs and angel investors who are able to, and also giving out examples of our economic contribution, and also the different, different ideas where investors can invest in queer businesses and queer business owners. And our main takeaway from there was that most people want to invest in LGBTQ business or LGBTQ owned business, irrespective of if they're LGBTQ focused or not, either a vegetable seller, a garage owner. But again, there's that blockage. So what we do with what we've done, we've created a session throughout the year that actually focuses on desensitizing what it means to be LGBTQ, or what it represents. We find sessions which are fun, which are lovable, which we create. We dance with music. Again, if we can have a glass of wine while doing it, let's do it. We are fun people. We are queer. We are creative. Let's find a way of welcoming people into our fun world.
Absolutely.
And from there,
absolutely.
Sorry, and from there,
there's such a fear of the unknown, and I think that that's something that sort of taints all of the conversations from an outside tourism perspective of traveling into Africa. You might travel, on a group safari or some kind of protected bubble, but then there's this misconception that what's happening on the ground is quite scary all over, and you're distinguishing an entire continent with one sort of big black mark and writing it off, and that's what we really have to fight against.
And that's very true. And for queer, the travelers from Europe who want to come and visit Kenya or Tanzania or Uganda at this time, like, how do I visit? with all these laws going on. I think the most important thing is like check what the legal framework where you are able to operate within. Our countries, our continent is very beautiful. Come and just look at the legal framework where you're able to say. And I say there's safety in numbers. Also look at the seasonality, because when you're traveling, for example, to the coastal side of Kenya, as a queer couple, it's so easy to be singled out during low season. But during the high season, you're a big group of tourists. You are one, two, or two among thousands. There's not easy way to single you out as a queer couple. And I think East Africa is a very hospitable place, and we are very friendly, and we respect one another. We respect every tourist, as long as there's that reciprocity in terms of respecting each other's culture.
Aisha, I saw both you and Michael kind of leap forward, like you wanted to get into that.
Wanted to get involved with Rodney. This conversation is amazing. No, there's a few things Rodney was saying that just resonated so well, especially in terms of allies, and the important role that they play in all of this. And I think, you know, for anybody who is unsure or worried, is about also kind of wanting to be in this for the long run. There isn't like a blanket thing that you would do, then all of a sudden you would understand everything about the LGBTQ community. And I think there's so much as individuals that we have to unlearn about ourselves and about what we've always been taught. So for me, I think with anybody in the tourism industry that really wants to support making a change, is about longevity and sustainability, meaning that you want to be involved for the long run, because that's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to understand. And, you know, just like all these prides and all these organizations, and even the things that do, immerse yourself into the community. For things that you don't understand, you understand them better when you become part of it. And I think that's also a really key thing. For me, over the years, since I was about 14, I was volunteering. I was volunteering at everything, you know, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's sports. And then this is how I became part of UK Black Pride as well. Volunteering, giving up my time to understand, to support. And I think by doing that as an ally, you're just gonna soak everything in, and it becomes also second nature, something you don't have to think about, because you understand the people that you're with. You've been educated through absorbing the different resources that are around. So I think that is also not just important for this context, but also it's how we evolve and develop as human beings. So I think it's about understanding that's what we need to do in this context as well.
Absolutely. And I want to bring MC back into the conversation, and not forget her since she's off camera at the moment. But even beyond Durban Pride, she was speaking on our call last week about so many of the other prides that she's experienced locally. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because we're talking in the context of global tourism and international tourism, but domestic tourism is also a big part of the Pride conversation. And there are ways to connect within your own community and drive the narrative forward as well. So MC, I was hoping that you could share with us a little bit of your experiences with Pride in the country.
Sure. I think you need how does the English say it? Hit the nail on the head, insofar as the promotion and upliftment of domestic tourism. We have a lot of communities, and I know the worry from a business perspective tends to be about currency. Would people be able to afford? But we forget that, you know what, sometimes the packages that we put together don't have to be exorbitant, especially when it comes to domestic tourism. It's about how we make the experience worthwhile, such that that person, even with the little bit that they were prepared to spend, they've had their eyes opened up and they've learned about communities, even in their own country, that they did not know about. I think when we had conversations leading to today, some of the experiences that one had shared has a lot to do with, as you indicated, some of the traveling that one has done, primarily in South Africa, comparing the big cities, which is Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town, but even more so going into what they call the township prides, where you go to a township like Soweto. I mean, Pretoria Pride is not necessarily a township, but it would be at that level if you're looking at the size estimate of how many people are likely to attend, and therefore the economic power that that space would have. But the question is, even when that happens, what packages, what advertising and marketing have we involved ourselves insofar as the environment, culture, diversity insofar as food, dress, experience? I mean, there's a lot of tools that would help us create employment insofar as getting into the different communities and taking people in very inexpensive trips into the townships where they get to experience people in their diversity. I mean, some of the private schools do this, where you'd visit a community as a child and stay with them and get to learn something new. But I think what we are missing out insofar as the tourism space, but also as it celebrates diversity and sort of craft this, let us not only be limited to what we know and what we are comfortable with, but get out of your comfort zone and experience new life and new exciting experiences. I wish we could work together to package our view, one, of our world, and even at domestic level, but also how we reach out to communities in their diversity such that we do not limit ourselves and we do not prejudge based on our own preconceived ideas about what makes one a tourist, but also what can attract one to travel into a space, and what rich experience can they bring back, and can they help us generate traffic towards that particular space. So I think for me, those have been my great learnings, and it goes beyond just South Africa, where we've started traveling outside the continent, and of course being in spaces, or at least within the continent, where you're in countries like when we went to Uganda, when we went to Rwanda, and you're like, okay, now I'm in a space where I can't really be myself, but for a moment here, this is my reality. When I go back home, how do I say that? We are very much in a digital space. Young people are quite excited, and some of them are within families where they can afford. And have we tapped into that market insofar as digital tourism that is such that it's also able to sell other countries in a manner that is such that it ensures us safety when we go there, but also a very exciting experience. And I think the last one has a lot to do with working with governments. In South Africa, we have a progressive government insofar as where our constitution is at, but that's not the rest of the continent's experience. It doesn't mean though that we can't be traveling. The question is, how do we work together from a business perspective, working together with communities to influence that government agenda? It's normally the other way around, but perhaps this is our moment in time to influence the agendas from the powers that be. I hope that sort of helps give an experience, at least from where one is located.
And how do you start those conversations with governments, Michael? How do you engage authorities and
LoAnn, I think even before I answer that, I think it's really important to acknowledge, from an allyship perspective, I think, and us who are driving this LGBT inclusive tourism agenda, it's important for us to acknowledge that there are organizations, there are hotels, resorts, tourism authorities around Africa that are embracing this, that are actually, in spite of the legal challenges that they face within their respective countries, they are saying, well, we want to embrace, we want to train our staff, we want to empower our staff to get better at it, to understand it on a deeper level, so that we can create an inclusive environment. And I think having those conversations, we need to start with the tourism authorities, the national regional tourism authorities. They've got the access, first of all, to the tourism industry, to the right people, and they've got the voice. And if they're on board with us, they're funded by government for the most part. So if they're on board with us and they are doing the sustainable right thing, governments will ultimately, eventually, I believe, follow. Yeah, allyship is important. We need to respect them.
No, it absolutely is. We don't exist in a vacuum as queer people. We have our friends and our families and our allies that are part of our world experience. And they're also looking at what's going on in different places in the levels of acceptance and thinking about that in terms of where they travel, because that's part of their support. That is what it means to be an ally as well.
Yeah.
And also just on Michael, I remember the conversation in Cape Town. How do we move past Pride Month just be only 1 month to being celebrated across the years? How do we invite in the corporates to just stop doing Pride Month or Pride advertisement only during Pride Month? And it goes back to allyship. Allyship has to be intentional, not a token based for only 1 month. And that token based allyship only exists when there's a disconnect between their world and our world, what they think it should look like. And we can change the narrative by, again, it goes back to education. We have to make sure that the allyship is not a token based one. It's not, it has to be intentional. It has to go beyond just Pride Month. And just goes back to even what you're doing right now, even with our funding, realize getting funding for the Chamber of Commerce it's more of token based and very restricted. It's more of the diversity and inclusion is something new. So every corporate wants to do it, but they're not doing it from a place of I'm fully immersing myself into your world. It's a place of, oh, let me do it just to tick a box within my company. And that allyship has to be intentional and not just from a token. And again, goes back to education and bringing people into our world.
Yeah, and that's why I have so much respect for the organizations that are reaching out to me, requesting training and I can't mention names obviously, but in countries that it is really, really illegal. In Africa, in the Indian Ocean Islands, in Africa, East Africa, West Africa, North Africa, where they're saying we want to go beyond this. We don't want to just be intentional. We want to be intentional. We don't want to just check the box. We want to get it right. So we want to understand it, and I have huge respect for that.
Yeah, those are exactly the type of allies we want, but also I feel like not just as allies, I think there's also something to understand about supporting, championing LGBTQ voices and marginalized voices in terms of what it does for your company, in terms of in the future and the longevity of it. So when you are supporting anybody that's marginalized, especially the queer community, what you will be effectively doing is not just helping LGBTQ travelers, you'll be helping all travelers. I say this, for example, as a woman, you know, traveling can also sometimes feel uncomfortable. There's elements of safety, traveling solo. So the thing that you are actually doing is by supporting the LGBTQ community or working with us, there's a ripple effect where when you tackle certain things, everybody else starts to feel comfortable. If you are a woman traveling, if you are from a different culture, so all these things are actually intertwined. You're not just supporting LGBTQ people, you're actually effectively creating robust systems in whatever service that you provide so everybody can feel included. And I think this is, you know, when we talk about intersectionality, when Audre Lorde says, hey, support Black women or support this group, that's what you're doing. That ripple effect happens when you're supporting those who are being hit the most. So in, I don't know, in X amount of years or down the line, all your guests will feel comfortable. All your guests will be like, wow, this hotel, it caters to all of me, not just part of me. And that's what this is all about as well. It's the ripple effects later, and it's the welcoming and the belonging that you create for any service that you have.
100,000%. I mean, that's why IGLTA does what it does. That's why we work with businesses, particularly queer businesses in emerging destinations, to help connect them to a larger network and create conversations and opportunities that will uplift them in their work, but also having those conversations year round with corporations about the importance of allyship and support. We're always getting asked, you know, what's IGLTA doing for Pride Month? well, we're living it 365 days a
Sorry.
year. It's Pride Month. And, and to Michael's point, yes, it had started in June, and that's why we're here recording this webinar in June, but, it happens in every month around the world. There is a Pride event now, more and more. So it's about continuing those conversations year round. And I think that's something actually, Aisha, you can address. You have this opportunity as the LGBTQ plus ambassador for Kentucky, which also does, in their tour repertoire, a number of African tours. So have you thought about, what that looks like in terms of expanding the narrative through that work, through a corporation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why I got involved with them, is what we can do in terms of the product development and also changing of policies, and how, because as time goes by, they are attracting more and more LGBTQ travelers as well. And it's about wanting to get it right and to be authentic and make sure that whoever is on that trip, because they predominantly cater to 18 to 35-year-old, that they, get, I guess, the best experience that they can have, because I think it's very important that everybody feels included. So, for example, room policies is always a big issue for travel companies, especially for group travel. How do you capture certain data at the start of when somebody books a trip, how you assign in rooms, it tends to be gendered based, but how do you change that and also still make sure that everybody that is on that trip feels safe and is actually having different ideas on the table that potentially people didn't recognize, but also understanding the world is changing. There are more and more Gen Zs that recognize as being part of the LGBTQ community. As they grow older in the next 10 years, you're going to have more and more travelers from our community, but how are you catering to them? And I think it's starting early and making sure that certain policies are in place right now, that you are working with organizations that exist in the cities and the countries that you're in, because they're the best form of resources to start doing that. And for me, it's about also the connection and making sure that, for example, Kentucky are working with queer safari tours and organize it, because they are out there. But often when you don't know, you assume there aren't enough queer services out there. And we know that. I mean, Rodney can tell you the same with MC and Michael. Sometimes you go, oh, they're on queer agents or tours. That's not true. It's just having the right people in the first place that can pinpoint you to that direction. And I think that's what's important. You shouldn't really try to change things without having the people who are part of it on the table, as part of what you're doing. And I think that's really, really important, especially if you're worried about getting it wrong. You're less likely to get it wrong if you involve us rather than assume what we should have.
Absolutely. And if I may, please forgive the shameless punt of a product here. But
no, I thought she teed that up very nicely, and I'm ready for it. Go.
On the Kentucky conversation, that is one of the reasons why I have launched a product in South Africa called the Glitter Trail, which is essentially an opportunity for young tourists to come to South Africa, explore it from the ground up, and meet people, meet LGBT communities, experience LGBT-owned restaurants, stay in properties, whether it's hotels or small guest houses or B&Bs, who are doing the work actively to become truly inclusive, and spread the love that way. So it's about creating products that are LGBT inclusive, as opposed to just tapping into what exists and hoping they are without any knowledge or any experience behind it.
Yeah, some years ago, I traveled across Namibia with an IGLTA member at the time in a little minivan with the rainbow flag on it. And, we talked a lot about how he developed his business model. And when he was starting out, he wrote to the suppliers that he was interested in collaborating with around the lodges and in the cities, and said, look, I'm going to be bringing LGBTQ plus travelers on tours. What do you think? I want you to know that this is what I'm doing, and I need to know that I can provide safe spaces for them. Some people responded with silence, but other people wrote back and said, that's amazing. Our front desk manager is queer and, we can't wait to have you. Or, we're so excited because we have XYZ staff members who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they'd love to meet your guests. So if you don't start those conversations, then you never know. You have to be willing to reach out and talk to people about these issues. And that's why we have to keep having these webinars and keep having these conversations.
Yeah, so LoAnn, what we're doing from our training perspectives, we're pushing these organizations a step further. We're saying, yes, it's great that you have the queer person at the front desk or whatever the conversation is. We're asking them the harder questions of what are you doing for them? Are you looking at your policies? Are you bringing gender neutral and gender inclusive language into your contracts? And so on. We're getting quite relatively hardcore with them, and they're loving the conversation because they're learning and they're seeing the gaps and they're seeing where they're not getting it right and acknowledging it and making the changes, which is going to lead to sustainability.
Absolutely. And I know all of you offer different kinds of diversity training and support on this call. And so we're going to be sharing out those resources afterwards so that people can reach out to you and to your organizations and get additional support. Because again, that's what's so important.
Just to add on Aisha's point on not knowing, because here in Kenya, there's so many queer travel operators. And some people ask like, oh, are there any? But like, yeah, there are like 100 here. Are there inclusive hotels? Like there are 100 here. So I think what we found out, because the chamber is coming into 1 year right now, and we have different members on different industries. Whether you're looking for someone from the hotel, you're looking at a tour operator, a travel agency. It also goes into real estate. Like there's a big plethora of different sectors and different industries. But again, it goes back to what Aisha was saying. You have to talk to people who are on the ground. You can't assume what you don't know, because there's less visibility on the internet. Because of the legal framework, we have to go by referral. And it goes back to, again, I think the question when I was in Cape Town is, I want to invest in a tour operator, or I want to invest in tourism. But hold on, we're already existing. Why don't you talk to someone who's already on the ground and find a way to help and assist them?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that also IGLTA recently rolled out IGLTA accredited also in the category of shameless plugs, but it's also to create a global standard for the hotel industry and measuring against an 8-point criteria that is not just about how you treat your guests, but also about, and diversity train for the staff to provide them welcoming experiences, but also, to Michael's point, looking at how you treat your employees. Are you providing your employees with safe, equitable workspaces? And so it's across the board. It's internal and it's external in order to be truly inclusive, to be authentic allies. And those are the conversations we're going to keep having to move forward, because it can't just be about ticking a box.
Yeah, and you know, I'm a huge advocate for IGLTA accredited. It creates an accountability where organizations, they're not just checking the boxes, they're not just getting the training and meeting the criteria of the eight checkboxes. They have to continue to do it. They have to, on an annual basis, we have to go back and say, are you still there? What's changed? Are you keeping up with the trend? Things change? Are you with the times? We're not just doing it and walking away. So there's accountability for it, which is great.
Because we all have seen the businesses throughout the industry that has one champion on staff, and they carry the flag for us, and it's amazing. And then they leave and go to another business, or they leave the industry altogether. And then what happens to that property or that business in terms of—
Absolutely. And I suppose also, and this may sound a little harsh, but training your staff doesn't necessarily give you the license to rainbow wash during Pride Month. You need to still continue to do the work and continue to change policies and look into all of those things. And then, in my opinion, you then get the license to jump on board with with the Pride events from a rainbow washing perspective.
We still want you to participate in Pride.
Of course, yeah.
Also participate in everything else.
Yeah, of course.
And being mindful of time, because I know this conversation could go on for a very long time, and we're really just starting to scratch the surface. MC, for you, what is your hope for Pride in Africa? I'd like to hear from everyone a bit about their vision for the future.
So I think for me, what would be my hope
Okay,
for
MC,
Pride?
I think we have to notify that this is your third outfit change.
I was gonna say, you know,
So
black,
brave as well.
orange, blue. I love it. Camera comes on, it's like a reel.
It's the real reason that she's off camera. She's,
Oh my God. 3 different locations, 3 different out changes. Okay.
And 3 different venues, love it.
So I do apologize, but I think that's the excitement about our webinar, is that it allows one to be with you, connect, and at the same time be able to fulfill the agendas for Pride this week. I think for me, it then also leads to what one wanted to say about really my hope for Pride in Africa in particular, where we are within a context where the concept of human rights is still not very much respected and promoted. That I'm hoping that the more we engage as civil society working together with business and our governments, we champion a new social cohesion, so to speak, type of conversation about embracing diversity, that we do not talk about the rainbow flag only in the context of LGBTI, but that when we talk about rainbow colors, it is really very much about, look at how beautiful they are together in one flag. And if we could just be that community that is able to celebrate and live effectively together in our diversity, that's what one would want. But it's a social cohesion level. But from an economic background, I think what one would want to see Pride do is allowing us spaces to grow, to thrive, as indicated in this conversation, as individuals that are LGBTI ourselves, but also the market and the experience of diversity within our different contexts. I think really for me, if that can be achieved in the next 5 to 10 years, we'd have a far more productive and forward moving continent.
Bravo. Well, we know that this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but Aisha, how are we going to move this along faster? What's your vision for the future?
I think for anything to change, you know, as queer people who've existed for so long in hostile environments, with, you know, some of us come from backgrounds where we feel a bit more liberated or we have a bit more freedom. I think anybody who wants to be an authentic ally needs to understand that our queerness has always been political. So I think at the root of anything is understanding that, and Pride in its foundation is a protest, and not to forget that, because especially in African countries, I think that needs to lead the way, like it has done in so many countries across the world, in the US, in the UK, you know, the gay liberation front. There's an element of protest because people truly do need to understand that this is something, this is a movement that needs to happen. So for me, I want that, I want to see more and more of that, but not just kind of leaving it just for queer Africans just to do that, but for the rest of the world to support. So when we talk about a community, I'm not just talking about my London community, it's an international global queer community where we need to start supporting, where if we have a bit more privilege or we have more resources, how can we put that to Pride? You know, how can we fund organizations that are currently there so that they can feel, they can be amplified, they can be more visible, they can have, I guess, the resources to fight, essentially. And fighting can mean so many things. Fighting can mean, you know, being able to talk to government, being able to ensure the safety of the queer members that exist right now. So for me, Pride, I want to see Pride being led that way. And then, of course, as well as the celebration, which I think, again, tourists would want to have. So I think the foundation needs to be a protest, and then the celebration, and then everybody coming into the African countries to enjoy, but to recognize that this is about change. And for the tourism industry to be part of that and go, we recognize it, we want to be part of this movement. Because once we do that, and I think it's about learning from the past as well. In order to move forward, you need to look at history. You need to look at what worked and what didn't. And for me, what didn't work is about only amplifying or championing one voice. It needs to be all of us being championed through the next big Pride movement that is going on right now. So I think if we do elements of these things, I feel like, yeah, things will definitely get better. I mean, it will. I mean, it obviously is going the wrong way at the moment, but it can get better.
And Michael, how does that tie into your vision for World Pride?
So what I haven't said on this call is in addition to our World Pride 2028 bid for Cape Town, we have also submitted a bid to Interpride to host the Interpride World Conference and AGM in Cape Town for 2024, October 2024. We should know in the next couple of weeks whether we are successful or not. But the importance of that is ultimately tourism is always affected by it. But the reason we want to start that conversation here is from an LGBT human rights perspective, because we, as I said earlier, we've got the platform in Cape Town, we've got the support, we've got the governance, we've got funding to be able to start those conversations to help other Pride movements within Africa and create a global conversation around the need for it and find the gaps and help find the solutions so that it does become an easier experience for everyone. I mean, ultimately, we do want to win the World Pride event for 2028 for a number of reasons. Tourism obviously is one of the driving factors there. We are up against two big cities that are great contenders as well. So we've got a work cut out for us. So we need support as well in our efforts. We need support from the tourism industry. We need support from Pride organizations and LGBT organizations in Africa and around the world to help us see the vision of why it's important that it comes to Africa. Neither of those events have ever been held on the African continent before, and Cape Town is perfect. We are the beacon of hope. It needs to come here. The conversation needs to start here.
Well, we're definitely cheering for you, for sure. And I want to leave the last word on this with Rodney, because I feel that of all the panelists, he sits in the space that has presented the most current challenges with his role in Nairobi, and still maintains an incredible, beautiful optimism as he sits there in his rainbow Pride shirt. So Rodney, what is your vision and hope for the future of Pride in Africa?
I think my hope for the future is for the number one, for the private sector, especially international organizations operating in these regions, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, or with any country where all these laws are being introduced, to recognize the power they play, to recognize their role. They contribute so much to the country's economy, and that means they have a say. You can't operate with international standards while in the country where you're operating, you don't adhere to the same. They need to find a way of adhering within the same inclusivity and diversity while still respecting the legal framework where they're operating. And them putting their name on a Pride event or supporting it means so much, because it offers these events security, a security blanket. For example, our first event that we did 2 years ago with Amnesty International supported us. And from there was no security or police will ever even come to attack us. So the international organizations need to back us up at this stage while still respecting the laws of where they operate in. The second one, I think my vision is for the general public to come into our world, because again, there's so much, again, it goes back to the fear of unknown. if we can find a way of bringing the general public into our world, they can hold our hands, because it's a constant battle. We need the general public support to be able to win this fight. Sometimes the government might care, sometimes they might not, but if we have the support of general public, and it goes a long way, because there's masses, there's a safety in numbers. And at this stage, we need more allies. We need more organizations to come in, and we need general public to say, we are together, you're my brother, you're my sister, you're my family. How can I be able to assist you in this fight? How can I be able to celebrate you and be able, not just feeling harassed in the workplace and being harassed everywhere? How can I be able to support you? How can I come into your world? And I think for me, that's the future of Pride. In the next 3 years, let's see if we are matching. I want straight people, whichever orientation you belong in, as long as I'm your brother, I'm your sister. This is, again, as Aisha said, this is a fight every single day. Join us in this fight. Help us through this journey.
We are here, we are queer, and we are not going away.
Exactly.
This is the march forward for Pride in Africa. And I encourage everyone to travel to Africa, because it is a beautiful, messy, complicated, diverse, incredible, incredible continent with so many individual countries, and it should never be defined as one place. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to my amazing panelists, MC, Rodney, Aisha, and Michael. Until next time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, LoAnn. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah.